Well, joining me now on 891 Mornings is Jeremy Clapp from FMG Engineering. Now, Jeremy, we're going to talk a bit about the way Adelaide is developing, and you've been involved in projects there. But let's just start with the news that Canberra has just taken over Adelaide as the most livable city in Australia.
That's right, and good morning, Ian. Thank you for having me in here. I found that quite an interesting study, actually, and the Property Council for about the last 4 years has been using Ozpoll to poll roughly 600 residents in each city to gauge what's important to those people, and the sorts of things that they ask people are public transport, education, health, affordable housing, and I think there are 17 criteria in all that they ask people, and they use that to get a bit of a sense of how people rate their city. So Adelaide has polled very well over the first 3 years of that study. Canberra has just pipped us this year, and I think the sentiment that has really led to that for this year is a bit of pessimism about the economy, and that's one of the factors that is polled.
Well, we're talking about the pessimism to do with the economy. We've just seen the $75 million housing development at the former Channel 7 site at Gilberton change its name from 45 Park to it'll now be known as Gilberton. The people that are developing that are saying that, look, there are some issues there. They aren't obviously selling as well as they would have thought. Yes. So is there a general lack of confidence?
I did attend a Housing Industry Association Outlook breakfast late last week, and the mood there was certainly that we've come off a very low base, and whilst not being the most buoyant of times, the thought is it has come off the bottom, and that housing starts and the like will improve. So it's probably symptomatic of coming off the back of a very low market over the last 2 years, and we've certainly seen that through our business.
I'm talking to Jeremy Clapp from FMG Engineering. Now, Jeremy, just staying with that Channel 7 site there, I mean, the original plan was for 120 apartments across 7 buildings up to 4 stories, and now that's being scaled back in a sense because the properties would be built in stages according to sales.
Correct.
So if you look at that site, you probably couldn't get a better site closer to the city, could you? I mean, it's on a river, next to a parkland, on a transport line. This doesn't bode well, does it? Because they were also given, I think, a special concession in terms of stamp duty.
It has. It's within the zone, as is Bowden and the centre of Adelaide, with stamp duty concessions and the like. It is a fabulous site. I'm not privy to the selling prices on those apartments, and from my understanding, it's a fairly high-end development.
But is it possible that we're building too much in Adelaide? Because if you look around in the city at the moment, and this happens to be what is a cycle, you have boom-bust cycles. If you look in the city at the moment, I can see a lot of building construction going on in terms of apartments. Are we going to get to the stage where we've also got Bowden happening down there, the urban village? Then if you put too much out there, and you've still got the houses on the urban fringe being developed.
I don't think so. I think perhaps it's a case of build it and they will come, but there is a move to medium density living, and I personally wondered about whether Adelaide was ready for that type of living. But from what we've seen with the sales on the apartments down at Bowden, certainly St Clair development at the old Cheltenham site, where there's great amenity and open space and so on, the sales of those medium density properties have been going exceptionally well. So I don't think that there's a fundamental problem. You're absolutely right. Its proximity is great, and I'm sure in the fullness of time they'll get the good outcome there. It's a great location. It ticks many of the boxes that the study that the Property Council runs was looking at. Proximity to the city. They probably need to work out how they connect public transport and buses there, but certainly it fits the bill of a walkable location to the city and so on.
I'm talking to Jeremy Clapp from FMG Engineering about the way the City of Adelaide's developing. If you find that projects don't sell as well as they should, is it to do more with price then, do you think, that people are actually saying, look, that maybe the developers are asking too much?
Sales of properties are price sensitive, so there is no doubt that that can be an issue, and that's actually something that we're very interested in as a business. You would appreciate that constructing detached dwellings on the fringe of the city is a fairly straightforward model, whereas building a medium to high density development where you're going up 3, 4 or 5 stories, obviously the cost of building those structures is considerably dearer, so that does become an issue. And we're looking very actively in our business at how we can engage with builders, look at new lightweight materials, new construction techniques. I think we'll see a move in the future towards a lot of prefabricated construction. So
that doesn't sound all that good, though, because when people hear cheaper form of construction, they actually think cheaper as in not as good. I mean, I've heard of one developer in Adelaide who told me that he's now building his houses out of styrofoam walls, and
which is a very good insulating property. And I don't think you should confuse cheaper with poorer quality. We can look at what's happened overseas, particularly in Europe, and we have quite a number of English engineers working in our firm who have got a lot of experience with these prefabricated forms. And I guess with prefabrication, some of the cost benefits can come through minimising waste. We are actually involved in some research and development projects interstate, and one of those projects is actually looking at the waste in construction, which is upwards of 15%. So if you can save 15% in the material costs just by being clever and minimising the waste, then there's a saving that can come through into the structure. So I wouldn't really confuse quality with cheaper. It's about speed with which you can construct buildings and so on.
In the old days, when they built buildings out of bricks, you didn't have too much waste because if you ordered too many bricks and you had some left over, you could just move them on to the next site. So maybe they knew something better in the past, did they?
Well, perhaps they did. It's probably a bit easy for builders to have a skip out the front and just chuck the stuff away. So, and I guess those sorts of materials don't lend themselves, sheets of gyprock and the like, to moving on. But
bricks do, don't they? Yeah.
But bricks do.
Bricks and plaster, that's what they used to build with. So have we become a bit too smart over the last few years? We're deciding to build buildings which we want to build on cost, and then we put them up quickly, and then we have a whole lot of stuff left over, and now we've got to go back and rethink how we build our buildings. There's
certainly an opportunity to be smarter about how we design and construct these buildings, without a shadow of a doubt.
Okay, well, what will we see in, for example, the Bowden Urban Village? I mean, you're involved in that down there. Yes. Are we seeing traditional buildings there, or are we going to see prefabs put up there?
There's a whole manner of different constructions that are going on there. I would say that from what I've seen down there, and there are a couple of apartment buildings that we've been involved in, and they're probably what I describe as more traditional type construction. What the Bowden development particularly has stimulated amongst the building fraternity is a lot of discussion about how they can improve the delivery of those 3- and 4-storey buildings, and we're in discussions with some about new building techniques. I guess as you start to learn the various issues around 3- and 4-storey building, and you try and apply, I'll call them residential construction techniques into those buildings, then you need to think about how you deliver those projects, and it has certainly stimulated
so in other words,
discussion.
In other words, we're doing things that we weren't doing before, and we're having to learn. We're probably making a few mistakes. In other words, you have to have scaffolding now, for example, because there'd be occupational health and safety issues. If you go above 3 stories, you might have to start putting in some sort of lift mechanism, even just for the builders to build it.
Look, that is correct, and workplace health and safety, that is definitely an issue that builders they're having to deal with anyway. The regulations have changed on that recently, upping the ante for residential builders. But clearly, when you're working on a 3- and 4-storey building, there's another level of...
Okay, so this is interesting what you're saying, Jeremy Clapp from FMG Engineering, that really, if you build a traditional ground-level building or even a 2-storey building, in some ways it's actually cheaper than building a multi-storey building until you get to a really high level of multi-stories. So a lot of this development that we're looking at in Adelaide, which is the 2 to 3-storey one or even the 5-storey we hear about, they actually may not be as cheap to build as perhaps the developers thought.
The developers are a clever bunch. They know the build cost, but you're right. It is definitely more expensive to build up. So a 2 or 3-storey building is dearer per square metre to build than a single-storey building, and that's where, by being clever and looking at the construction techniques, materials, and so on, that you can refine how quickly, how effectively, and I guess lightweight construction is a topic that the industry is looking at. How can you build lightweight construction? So timber framed, timber veneer, laminated timber beams, that sort of construction.
That all sounds good. In fact, I think most people would think that timber would be a pretty good building material to use until you mention the words white ants. So
we have the technology to deal with that, Ian, absolutely. So that's not an issue.
But a lot of those barrier techniques, I mean, personally, I had a house built in the late 1990s when they got rid of the really nasty poisons, and I've now got someone coming around, every 6 months they come and check bait stations and do things. I mean, you pay a lot of money, don't you, to keep your house white ant free?
That may be older style dwellings. Certainly the materials that are used to provide barriers at the interface is fine. And I guess one of the building techniques that is being looked at is coming out of the ground with a concrete slab at first floor level and building lightweight from there as well.
So then timber on top of that.
And I guess as engineers, these are the problems that we solve. And there's a solution to every problem, really.
All right. Just finally, are you likely to see these new techniques, which sound very interesting, being experimented with at Bowden, or where will people see these new styles of building, which could be, concrete on the bottom, timber on the top?
I would expect that Bowden will see some of these innovations. It's, I guess, a project that has a delivery timeframe of greater than 10 years over the life of the project.
And our listeners could just go down there and have a wander around the village and have a look and see what's being built and see the different styles. I
would encourage people to do that. If people haven't been down there to have a look at Bowden, it is quite a different look. The whole design of the development is around walkable communities. There are no curbs on the roads. There are trees on the edge of the roads and in the middle to provide to slow traffic down. And I think once the buildings are up and the first group are probably 3/4 of the way through construction, you'll get a real feel for how these communities and vibrant cities and cafe culture and so on will pan out. And it'll be a model.
It's an experiment and hopefully a model experiment, is it?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time this morning. Jeremy Clapp from FMG Engineering here on the morning program with me, Ian Henschke.